You probably know that the YouTuber Airrack just hit 10 million subscribers. This is a huge accomplishment.
Dear Airrack, we hope you'll accept this Diamond Creator Award as a token of our appreciation.
And to celebrate this,
Airrack had the goal set out that he was going to make the world's biggest pizza party.
There was 10,000 people here.
And the world's biggest pizza. Airrack's done a ton of pizza related stuff in the past. He even launched his own pizza sauce called Pizzafy. So dude's obsessed with pizza, right?
you probably saw a few posts on social media of Airrack standing right in front of this enormous pizza, holding an enormous pizza cutter. And you might be asking yourself, where does somebody even get something like that? Well, I can tell you for sure where it came from, because I'm actually the one who made it.
And that's the story I want to tell you today. I hope you enjoy it. A while back I was in a YouTuber group called Creator Now. I met a lot of people on there, and one of those people is Groovy Gavin. By now you've probably seen his video about Ohio. If you haven't, go watch that. But this guy is truly talented. All of his ideas are top notch. So one day while I'm at work, I get a call from Gavin. And he's like, hey man, I know you build weird stuff, like my bunk bed or my tire launcher that you might have seen before. Go check those out after this video. I know you build weird stuff. Do you want to maybe collab with me on building the world's biggest pizza cutter for Airrack? Obviously, I'm a huge fan of both Gavin and Airrack, so I said yes immediately. But my biggest reservation was whether or not I could actually make it happen. I knew I could build something that looked good, but like, this is Airrack, like one of the biggest, fastest growing creators at this point, and he was about to hit 10 million subscribers. And Gavin, being the genius that he is, knew 100% that this would go off without a hitch. So I said yes. We had some discussion about the design, and like any good engineer, I made 3D models of everything, sent them over to Gavin. He gave me the green light, and I started building it. Now, I am by no means a master woodworker. I really have barely worked with wood at all. So this goes back to my insecurity of whether or not I could actually make it look good. So with the basic design, when I modeled it up, it was gonna be about 8 feet long. That was including a 36-inch disc for the pizza cutter part, a classic style guard and everything, and the big wood handle. I wanted to, as much as possible, make this like a big scale model. So what I did was I took an existing pizza cutter shape, pasted that down on my computer program, traced it out, and basically made a huge model of that. I took some creative liberties, changed a few things, and I knew for a fact this thing was gonna have to go all the way from Idaho to California. So when I designed it, I made it so that only 2 bolts hold the thing completely together, and when you take those 2 bolts out, the handle will come completely off, and I can ship it in 2 parts. That way it could fit like in a small car trunk or whatever it needed to be. For the wood, I chose some LVL that I had from previous projects. It's basically layers of wood that's glued together. So it has tons of little layers, and I knew that once I sanded it down and stained it, it would end up looking really cool. And for the metal, I chose a 5052 aluminum, which is food safe. And that was obviously what we're going for. We wanted this to actually be able to cut Airrack's pizza. The alternative was stainless steel, but because of weight and cost, I actually wanted one person to be able to hold it and cut the pizza with it. So I went with aluminum. Lightweight, pretty strong, food safe. What more can you ask for? The way I made the handle is I figured out how thick it needed to be and how many layers it needed to be. The LVL pieces I had were 1.5 inches thick, and that broke down into 5 pieces. I cut them down into a basic shape, and then I hollowed out the middle. And once all that was done, I glued it all together and clamped it. So it is midnight. I am going to let this dry overnight here. And yeah, I've hollowed out this inside of the handle so that it's a little bit lighter weight so you can actually use it. And tomorrow I'm gonna grind off a ton of material over here, contour it down, and make it look actually nice. Go through a couple different grits of sandpaper, and this handle will basically be ready. Right here we've got what happened last night. This is just like the rough shape. Basically what I have to do now is I have to go through and just shape the whole thing, just grind it down, make it all nice, and actually take shape, because honestly right now it looks kind of ugly. Let's make this thing transform. After that big block was glued together and completely solid, I used some wood shaping tools, mostly from Harbor Freight, by the way. If you guys are looking for somebody to sponsor, you know, me and Harbor Freight go way back. I've been begging Harbor Freight to sponsor me for quite a while, and they haven't quite taken the bait. So if you guys are still looking for somebody, I don't know if you ever were, but if you are looking for somebody, I'm your guy, you know? Hook me up. Anyway, I use those tools like flap discs, different saw attachments to mold that handle into the right shape. That took quite a while, took a lot of sanding, a lot of going over the same places, and it was really cool to see it starting to take shape. There was one painted steel piece that I used as the main structural component so that I could connect all the metal into the handle. So I cut out notches in the ends of all the handle pieces to make sure that would fit snug and not show. As far as the metal design, I bought a full 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of 3/16 aluminum. With that thickness, I knew that it would be hard enough to not bend too much, but thin enough that I could actually cut a blade onto it. And yes, I did actually plan on putting a blade into it. A lot of people were surprised by that. I wanted this thing to be legit. all right? Out of that full sheet of aluminum, I cut a 36-inch blade, then the support piece that comes down and hooks onto the blade itself, and that like wavy guard thing. This was the first time I had used a CNC plasma table to cut aluminum, and I was pretty nervous that it was gonna warp. There were some scrap pieces that I had to throw away because they did warp. Once aluminum gets heated that much, it turns into basically a strip of bacon. Once I figured out where to put the weights to hold down the aluminum while it was being cut, it worked out perfect. The big blade piece was pretty high risk because it was taking so much of an area out of the sheet itself. So I was super nervous on that one because if that one got screwed up, I only had one more chance. It ended up working good on the first run, and all the lettering that says 10 million cut out perfect. Obviously that was part of the design because Airrack just hit 10 million subscribers. That was the whole purpose of the pizza party, and I wanted to make sure this was super personalized for him. So that's what I did. The biggest problem with plasma cutters is they leave a ton of jagged edges on the back side. So with aluminum, like steel, it left a ton of jagged edges, and getting smooth edges and a nice finish on this thing was the part that took the absolute longest time. This thing was a beast. Then obviously once everything was cut out, I had to grind down the edges a little bit, make sure everything was smooth, and then bend it. I was really nervous to bend this stuff. Aluminum tends to be super brittle, so I heated it up just a little bit, but I was really nervous that it was going to crack and break if I actually tried to bend it 90 degrees like I needed to. But luckily on the first try, it didn't break. So I was feeling pretty good about this stuff. The bearings I chose were stainless steel, food grade obviously. All the hardware was stainless steel. That rod and disc that actually holds the pizza cutter support frame to the disc itself that hooks into the bearings and spins with it is actually stainless steel, and I machined down that little rod so that it would fit in the bearings, and that stuff worked out perfect. So now I had all of the structural components. I had the handle. I still needed to finish the handle. The handle didn't look very good. The handle had cracks in it. And the way I fixed that was just basically putting sawdust in wood glue. It makes like a little paste, and you can just spread it into the little cracks. Push it down in there. Once it's dry, you just sand it off, and you get a nice smooth surface that's a lot stronger. That's one of the woodworker's tricks I did learn in middle school when I was in woodshop. So good stuff there. So now that I filled all the cracks, I just continued sanding the crap out of this handle because I knew at some point Airrack himself was going to be putting his hands on my wood. I knew at some point Airrack himself was going to be touching it. I knew Airrack was going to grab, Airrack and the boys were going to have to hold on to this wood. And I wanted them to like it. So with that in mind, I made sure that thing was so smooth, no splinters. And after consulting with Gavin, we picked out a stain that was not too light, not too dark. We knew we wanted to burn Sweet Pablo's, which is Airrack's like fake pizza brand from past videos, into the handle. I picked out this retro font and like traced it on there. And then I took a wood burner and painstakingly by hand burned Sweet Pablo's into the handle. That took quite a bit of time, but I think it turned out really cool. It's like one of my favorite parts of it. And again, it's just like so personalized for him. Like my goal making this was that I wanted to build something he actually wanted to keep, maybe even like display in his house somewhere as part of this like crowning achievement of him hitting 10 million subscribers, right? Like that's a huge accomplishment. And not only that, but if he could actually pull off the world's biggest pizza, like this is gonna be a big deal. And I wanted my pizza cutter to be something that he'd look at and remember the day, remember everything that happened. In order to make sure that the stain was gonna look right and that we could see the wood burning through the stain, making sure that it like wasn't too dark or anything, I ground down and sanded a piece of LVL exactly how the handle was, same amount of softness, right? And tested 3 stain methods along with wood burning on it, and we picked out the one that looked the best. So now that we had a plan on how it was gonna look good on the material, I went ahead and stained the handle, and after I was done, I put a thick coat of polyurethane on it. I think I ended up doing like 7 coats on it. I'm not 100% sure, but what that does is it seals the wood and makes it waterproof, kind of like a hard finish on it, like what you would see in like a wood kitchen table. It's just a clear coat to make sure that the wood doesn't get messed up, and that worked out good. So at this point, I knew the whole thing could be put together, so I let Gavin know. He arranged a flight to come up to Idaho, where I'm from, and come check it out in person. And I'd be lying if I said that didn't make me extremely nervous. I wouldn't say Gavin's like super famous by any means, but he's kind of a big deal on YouTube. Like he's really put out some good stuff, and it's kind of intimidating to have somebody so successful come and look at something that I'm building for them. So yeah, I was pretty nervous. But as soon as he got there and saw it, he loved it, and I think he was pretty happy that he chose me to build it for him. So while he was here, we filmed a little video where he was telling Airrack, hey, I've got the world's biggest pizza cutter for you, for the world's biggest pizza party and all that. When do you want it? Basically, this video was to get Airrack's attention and let him know that this thing was coming. I was expecting him to probably see it and think it was pretty cool, but I was not expecting the response that we got.
Eric, right now you're working on making the world's biggest pizza. It'd be kind of lame if you cut it with a normal pizza cutter.
That video that I filmed in my driveway ended up front and center on one of Airrack's next videos. He basically put up the video that we had sent him, said it was a good idea, and said that he wanted more people to build giant stuff for the pizza party.
I've also seen some other YouTubers starting to make things for the world's largest pizza party, like this giant pizza cutter. If you're a creator or a fan and you want to make something giant for the world's largest pizza party, maybe giant pizza topper, giant Parmesan cheese shaker, giant pizza box.
And once more, this just proves that Gavin is a genius. Not only did he come up with this idea for an awesome collaboration between the two of us, but he came up with something so good that even Airrack himself is putting it out saying, hey, this is an awesome idea, I want more of this. Props to Gavin. Check out his channel in the first link down below. You will not be disappointed, I promise. So at this point we knew, you know, this is dope. Like, Airrack is totally about it, but at the same time, this thing's nowhere near being done. So I had to make sure that I could actually get it done by the time the party happened, and I had a lot to do, and I didn't even really have a plan for how I was gonna sharpen it, how I was gonna get a good finish on it, because everything I had tried up to that point didn't really work. And you can even see in that video, it has big lines on it from me trying to do certain things and them just not working. So I was extremely nervous for the date to actually come when I needed to take this to California and give it to Airrack. So now the pressure was on. I knew he was expecting it. I knew I had a lot to do, and I couldn't let Gavin down. Some of you may know I'm actually a full-time engineer, and a lot of the time that I have to work on this is after work. This led to a lot of late nights, having to work on things at night, in the dark, in a plastic shed. But nevertheless, I feel like it proves the point that you can do a lot with less than you think. So the next steps were polishing all of the metal parts. That's the blade, the support pieces, the curvy guard thing, making sure there was nothing sharp on the inside of those little letters that could cut anybody, which would kind of suck. And finally actually cutting the angle into the edge of the blade that will allow it to cut pizza. Maybe toes, hopefully not toes. And honestly, whatever else you want to cut with this thing, because I have a feeling that it would go through anything that you try. It's probably more dangerous than I intended. And the way that I actually cut the blade into the edges, I set up a jig to hold the rod that goes through the center of the blade and made it so that it could spin freely. Set up an angle grinder with a 35 grit flap disc and set it up in an angle so that when I spun the disc, it would cut the same consistent angle into the edge of the disc. I did that on both sides. I had to repeat it several times, and the aluminum was 3/16, which is almost a 1/4 inch thick. So there was a lot of material to remove. So after I cut that blade in there, I went back with a couple of files and made sure that any burrs or anything like that on the edges got taken off. During that process, I actually cut my thumb and got a little bit of blood on it. So I knew it was kind of dangerous.
It's sharp.
Giant round knife. But unintentionally, I realized I could say I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. I'm not gonna tell you how much I cried, but it wasn't a small amount. There were many tears shed. And with that, I put the whole thing together, bolted it up, and just basked in the glory of what I'd created. I mean, this actually is a big moment for me. I've worked very hard on this thing. It is kind of emotional, honestly, to get it completely done. The fact that it looks so good. I can't believe I made something look so good. Most of the stuff I make doesn't look this good, but I worked super hard on this. Man, I still get kind of emotional thinking about it. Like, I was telling Gavin when we were at the pizza party that I've never gotten rid of something that I've built. People have told me in the past that they'd buy whatever thing I built or asked me if I would sell certain things, and I just really don't have the desire to do that because I form like an attachment to the things that I build. And even right now, knowing what happens later on in the story, the intention was always to give it away. And I'm happy to say that I did that. I no longer have the pizza cutter, but that still kind of hurts. Like, I know it's in a really, really good place, and trust me, it's in a really good place. But it's still, I don't know. I put so much work into that thing. And to just give it away, like, it's interesting that you can get attached to a piece of metal and wood. But I'm extremely happy that it's serving its purpose. Anyway, enough of that. Now that the thing's all put together, obviously I have to test it. Obviously the main goal was to cut a pizza with it, and so I had to test it on a pizza. And I'm obviously not gonna waste a pizza. I made this thing food safe for a reason, to make sure that I could cut a pizza and then eat it afterwards. I washed the whole thing really good with soap and water. Made sure I got in all the cracks and everything where it could have gotten greasy or whatever. Every compound that I had used on it up to that point was non-toxic, food safe. But I washed it with dish soap and everything, and then it was time to test it. I tested it on a single banana. After it cut through that with no problem whatsoever, I tried it on a bunch of bananas. Not just like a bunch of bananas, but like an actual bunch of bananas. Cut through that, no problem. After that, I stepped it up to a head of iceberg lettuce. That one was pretty satisfying to cut through. Obviously, it had no issue. Like, the thing's so heavy that I swear it could cut through a toe. I made sure that I didn't wear my Crocs during this experiment. Then, obviously, I had to step it up even further with a miniature watermelon. I knew that one was gonna be pretty cool. I just didn't want it to roll away, so I like pushed it really quick through it. Cut it, no problem. I don't know what I was expecting. Then for my second to last test, I laid out a package of hot dogs, the cheapest hot dogs I could possibly find, and it cut through those like I wasn't even cutting anything, like I was just rolling it on the table. So with all those preliminary tests done, I moved on to the holy grail, the ultimate test for this pizza cutter, which was obviously pizza. Got a Domino's pizza. I told him not to cut the pizza so that I had an accurate test, a blank slate, if you will, to test just how this magnificent pizza cutter could fulfill the measure of its creation, right? And I'm happy to say that it cut through that pizza with zero issues. It even cut the box, which I hope isn't an issue. But at this point, I knew for a fact it looked amazing, it cut amazing, fully functional, fully food safe. This thing was ready. So the only thing left to do was to pack it up in the car, take it down to Gavin in California, and see if we could get this thing into Airrack's event, the reason we did this whole thing in the first place. So this was the build video showing how I brought this idea to life from scratch and built one of the coolest things that I've built up to this point, probably the coolest, honestly. But I'm also doing a separate video for the trip down there and how it all worked out, Gavin's reaction to seeing the finished product, and giving this thing to Airrack's team, along with the result of everything that went down when we were down in California. I really enjoyed this project. If you're a YouTuber that needs something built or you know of one that does, just let me know. Contact me on Instagram. In the About section on my page, I have an email listed, and let me know what I should build for you or for somebody else. I'd be super interested in continuing this series of building things for YouTubers because I think it's something that I'm really good at and it's something that has a lot of potential. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Say it again, man, and that's a reverse. Never rehearse, jumping in first. Call up the nurse with the beat in the hearse. This is absurd.
Thing's so fire. Nicest pizza cutter I've ever had.
Video is does size matter.